think that VMDR is a disaster recovery for VMware infrastructure, you are in a wrong webinar. You might have to join the other one where they talk about the disaster recovery. Okay, just kidding, guys. So I'll quickly introduce about Elite CISO, and then we will dive right into the webinar. So Elite CISO, as I've explained earlier as well in different webinars, it's a platform for CISOs and by CISOs. So as I say, we are not a marketing company which is doing these events. So we are practicing CISOs from the industry. We understand what challenges are there. And that's why we build this platform where the CISOs and CIOs can come together, and then we can talk about the different security issues which are there. So if you look at the About Us, this is the live website of Elite CISO that I'm showing right now. And the core objective is community connect, right? Build a platform where CISOs and CIOs can talk to each other, share their problems, seek opinion, and then we focus on knowledge sharing, right? Whether it is technical knowledge or leadership skills or about security technologies, that's what we focus on. And we do different events like the one you are attending right now. We used to do a lot of in-person webinars earlier. Now, after lockdown, we have moved to the webinar format. We do not want the knowledge sharing to stop. So we started this webinar format, and then you will see we involve various vendors, and we do not take vendors as vendors. They are the partner to solve our challenges, right? That's what we focus on. And so from a knowledge sharing perspective, we do a lot of things. We recently started doing these podcasts where we bring industry leaders and we talk about for 15-20 minutes on different topics. So all the recordings are posted. And last webinar we did with Mansi, she shared great insights into endpoint security management and even shared a great template about selecting the vendor or doing a POC around endpoint. And likewise with Mr. Ram and Rishi, we recorded different webinars. So you can go over there and watch them. And we wanted that this lockdown should not be monotonous for CISOs and CIOs. So during the lockdown, we have done multiple workshops and training, whether it is IT Act or the Indian Personal Data Protection Act or PCI DSS. So we do multiple things around that, okay? And if you go events and under past event, you can see all the previous recordings. I'm going a little fast because I'm not the main speaker. I'm just introducing it to you guys. So under the past event also, you can see the different recordings we have done, different webinars we have done. So you can view the recordings over there. And if you want to become a member of Elite CISO, the primary requirement is you have to be CISO or a CIO of a corporate organization. These are the closed WhatsApp groups that we have. We do not add vendors or consultant in our groups. So if you want to be a member, if you're a CIO or a CISO, go to this page, fill the information, and then we will add you into the group. Now, coming back to the VMDR, so it is not the VMware Disaster Recovery Solution. It stands for Vulnerability Management, Detection, and Response. So that's a buzzword around managing enterprise vulnerabilities. I'm sure Sumedh will give deep dive insights into it. I'm not sure why the asset is missing from the VMDR name, right? It could be AVDR, then it could become the antivirus disaster recovery. So just from a naming perspective. Okay, look at this slide. I wanted to set some context. So this is from a latest Verizon DBIR. What they're talking about here is all the hacking incidents that happen. Primarily, more than 80% of them are because of stolen credentials or brute force. So hackers go to your RDP server or they go to your web application and they try millions of username and password. They get successful in a couple of them, and then they log into your environment and then deploy whatever they have to do, right? They hack into your environment. But if you look at the vulnerabilities, what hackers are exploiting, it is a very low share, right? Less than 20% incidents where hackers got access to your environment was via exploiting the vulnerabilities. But don't get me wrong over here. Managing vulnerability is very important because if a vulnerability is exploited, it becomes a big news, like Equifax. The Apache component vulnerability was exploited, and hackers got access to millions of user ID and passwords and other details in US, right? The PII details. Hackers exploited WannaCry and NotPetya just by exploiting the vulnerability. So it is extremely important to ensure that you have a good vulnerability management process. And look at the cost. $10 billion was the cost just of one ransomware, which is NotPetya, right? So if you are not managing the vulnerabilities properly, the cost is humongous. Okay. And again, very fascinating case study. What this came out recently, and it's from FireEye. What they're talking about here is 58% of vulnerabilities which were exploited were 0 days. So if you have a 0 day vulnerability that you are dealing with, how do you patch that? So that would be one of the question to Sumedh in terms of how does Qualys address this problem? Okay, and then out of 42 vulnerabilities which were exploited even after the patch was issued. So patches available, we have seen in the case of Equifax, we have seen in the case of the Citrix, Netscaler VPN device patches available, but still hackers are exploiting that actively. Okay. Another slide, just two more slides for that. So as I call it, Patch Tuesday and Exploit Wednesday. So the moment Microsoft patch is released, hackers are reverse engineering that and then exploiting the vulnerabilities, going out in the on the internet and exploiting. So within hours, vulnerabilities are getting exploited after releasing the patch. So you have to be extremely fast. And in the environment where CISOs are dealing with workloads in the cloud or on-prem data center or IoT or web applications. So components and assets are everywhere. How do you manage that? First of all, finding the asset itself is challenging task, right? So we will understand from Sumedh how we can manage the assets and how we can get better control on the overall vulnerability management process. So this is going to be the agenda for today. I've taken a couple of more minutes as an introduction, and then I'll transfer it over to Sumedh, who will talk about the vulnerability management from enterprise perspective. And then we have a great panel, which will talk again about risk prioritization. So over to you, Sumedh. And just before that, I would like to mention that there will be Q&A after Sumedh's session. So you can use the Q&A icon on your WebEx screen or client, and then you can post your Q&A over there, and then those will be answered. So over to you, Sumedh. And just one more thing. At the end, we are going to have a quiz, and one, not a quiz, a lucky dip, and one winner will get an Amazon Alexa. So over to you, Sumedh. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for that introduction, because so I think I need the sharing privilege to. Okay, there you go. Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully you can see my screen.
We can see.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much. So just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Sumedh Thakkar. I'm Chief Product Officer and President at Qualis. I've been at Qualis for 18 years. Right, I joined when we were 4 engineers working on the platform, and throughout the years we worked on developing a lot of different solutions and capabilities around vulnerability management, and we've evolved we've learned a lot, and we have evolved the platform along with how vulnerability management has evolved in the enterprises, as it initially started with servers and then moved to now it has moved to cloud containers, remote endpoints, which is a big thing right now. And today I would like to thank Vikas and the EliteCISOs organization for helping put this together. And I really thank you very much to everybody for taking the time to attend and for me to be able to share some of the thoughts that we have around how vulnerability management is evolving and why Qualys came up with the notion of vulnerability management detection and response to really help, and to Vikas's point, to really help organizations speed the process of mitigating these vulnerabilities and then taking more of a risk-based approach than a brute force approach towards vulnerability management. So I'm going to do a little bit of a discussion around how vulnerability management has been evolving. And then I will be doing a little bit of a demo to sort of give a perspective of VMDR. And I would be happy to answer questions at the end. And also afterwards, my email is in the presentation. Would be happy to answer any questions related to that and feedback, because at the end of the day, this is something that you're dealing with on a daily basis. So any feedback we get will be very beneficial to improving the direction that we are going. So okay, how do I go to the next slide? I'm stuck in annotation for some reason. Okay, there you go. So hopefully you can hear me. I'll try to speak a little bit louder. So as you are all aware, the threat landscape has been evolving. So early 2010, zero-day vulnerabilities were mainly exploited by nation state, industrial espionage, black market. So zero days still continue to be there today, but they are being much more rapidly weaponized, especially the newly disclosed vulnerabilities, which is the Patch Tuesday and the Exploit Wednesday, because there's so much advancement in technology from the hackers themselves. They have their development organizations, QA organizations. They are fairly well set up because of the financial incentive, and they are now actively targeting technologies used by remote workforce to compromise credentials, as Vikas was mentioning earlier, to be able to find ways and paths from the daily software that everybody's using, whether it's Zoom or Skype or other types of technology, to compromise the server side because of the access privileges that a lot of the employees have. And so that landscape has been evolving, because even at Qualys, we initially were very much deployed only on the data center side, on the few select machines, and people were scanning once every quarter or once every month. And from there, now today, we have customers, a lot of organizations that we work with have deployed vulnerability management as a continuous monitoring effort with real-time alerting and visibility, rather than what used to be a periodic sort of an audit of the vulnerabilities that was done. Of course, critical vulnerabilities are increasing. So while the number of vulnerability disclosure themselves has been increasing, the number that are being actually ranked as high and critical by CVE and CVSS are also increasing quite a bit. And a lot of vulnerable vulnerabilities are being exploited for ransomware and other types of attacks. And so the mean time to weaponize is rapidly decreasing year over year. And we saw that earlier in some of the statistics around Verizon data breach and some of the FireEye reporting also, which basically talks about how quickly vulnerabilities that are coming out are being exploited. And so the periodic assessment approach doesn't really work. Now, to add to that, the infrastructure is becoming extremely hybrid, and it's not anymore a sort of a specific operating system and a specific set of software that were being used. That is now, that could be patched much more evenly. Everything is hyper-connected, and so of course the threats sort of spread throughout the network, exploiting one thing to another. So that landscape has changed. I wanted to give this example of WannaCry, which is still very relevant in terms of how organizations, because of the plethora of vulnerabilities that they have, how they struggle to really get the vulnerabilities in control and focusing on the critical ones, right? In the desire to or in the push to patch everything, we end up missing things or not knowing what needs to be prioritized first. So this is something that when the patch release came out for the MS-17 or 10, which was in the March timeframe, a lot of our customers, of course, we today have, we do 3 billion scans a year. So we see a lot of data. And there are customers that do authenticated scanning or have agent-based detection who get a much better insight into their machine and what is installed and what the vulnerabilities are. And so we saw that there was a, of course, spike in the number of detections, but then we saw that a week later, there were some remediation efforts that were done to patch, but it was nowhere near the patching effort that was required to patch all of those. And then in around April, when the Eternal Blue exploit came about, that gave us an opportunity to reverse engineer the exploit to come up with a detection that could be done remotely without authentication, which showed us the number of immediately jump in the number of detections total we had, because it also shows that only half the devices are being scanned with authentication or having an in-depth view of the vulnerability. There were about half of those had no idea till a remote detection came about that they actually even had the vulnerability on those devices. And so the remediation, however, after that still continued flat because it was just one of the many vulnerabilities that everybody was dealing with, and so it wasn't really prioritized well. Now, of course, the following WannaCry came about that actually used that vulnerability exploit in ransomware. And after that, you could see that in May, the remediation effort turned into an emergency patching with everybody hands on deck, focusing on that one vulnerability to get control of that, because the damage that was being done by these was so severe. And so it kind of shows you that not necessarily focusing on prioritizing and patching key vulnerabilities, you can end up having a couple months here in this case of time frame that people could have leveraged to patch the critical vulnerabilities instead of they ended up missing that, and then a lot of damage was done. So there are challenges, right? It's not straightforward. There are challenges with doing vulnerability management effectively. And now it's becoming even more important today because everybody's working from home, and a lot of organizations are really facing this challenge to see how they all manage the endpoint security, because what used to be more of security controls around the endpoints or desktops that were in low people's environments within the office, firewalls, etc., become immediately non-usable. And quite a few organizations are also being forced to allow employees to use home machines because they're faster, better, they need to get the job done. So increase in the high-risk vulnerabilities, even if they're using a corporate laptop in a home network that could potentially have a lot of issues on the network itself. And my house, I have my 13-year-old son, and he has lots of Minecraft and Fortnite and all kinds of stuff installed that is installing potentially unwanted software, potentially malware that is within the network that is also looking at the corporate device that I'm using. To add to the overall complexity of deploying patches and fixing configurations, traditional patch deployment solutions, which really rely on VPN, are not really able to handle the load. We had the example of the SMB Ghost vulnerability. The patch was 300 megs, and if you had 1,000 machines trying to install the patch, that was about 300 gigs that was being installed, which is something that VPNs are not able to deal with. And so this kind of is causing more attack surface because you don't have that patches, and now these machines are directly going in many ways to the internet and are exposed to the hackers. And it's not just about the individual device itself, as we recently saw with the Zoom vulnerability that was exploiting the NTLM misconfiguration. It also carries the potential of leaking corporate credential or corporate access to outside entities, which can outside environment and be able to, whether it's through VPN or other ways, but then now they're getting a foothold to actually get to the critical data that is being hosted. So endpoint security is adding that additional challenge. And not being able to quickly fix or uninstall unwanted software, etc., adds more to that threat landscape. One of the big things that we brought up earlier, Vikas mentioned about asset inventory. So for effective vulnerability management, we see that the 4 key capabilities that everybody needs to have, which is, do you know where all your assets are, and being able to have up-to-date real-time asset inventory, especially in today's world where the flux in the number of devices is significantly higher. Being able to do vulnerability assessment, and not just vulnerabilities, but actually also looking at configuration. So it's not just software vulnerabilities, being able to do configuration assessment as well, and in real time and in continuous manner, not once a month or even once a week. Being able to weed through all of the vulnerabilities to decide the prioritization of which vulnerabilities are critical. And remember, this is not just about the vulnerability, it is also about the asset and the device on which that vulnerability is discovered, because the exact same vulnerability may not be as bad on one device which is configured a certain way, and maybe quite problematic on another device. An example of this is the 7 monkeys vulnerabilities that came out, and that vulnerability affected terminal software, and I will cover how that's different prioritization on different assets, even if it's the exact same vulnerability. And then, of course, the ability to do, whether it's patch management, also being able to do configuration managements, because sometimes it's 0-day, maybe there is no patch, but there are configuration updates that can be done on the machine. So how long does it take in siloed organization where patch management is owned by a different IT team to be able to go through this entire process and go from discovering an asset to actually patching the machine for that particular vulnerability? Many times these are different products. Asset inventory discovery products are completely different, owned by IT. Vulnerability management detection products are different. Configuration assessment products could be different. Threat prioritization ends up being a separate process, separate product. And then patch management again goes back to the IT teams, where security teams are at the mercy of the IT teams being able to do a good job of being able to detect what patches need to be deployed, and then actually taking the time within their methodology to actually get the patches deployed, even in cases of extreme emergencies. So that's why Qualys, where we have been for many years on detection of vulnerabilities, we decided to really work on putting together a lot of effort, thanks in big part to a major effort that we did out of our R&D center in Pune, where we now have 850 employees who are working very extensively on the latest technologies to build a lot of the things we do on the platform side. We have 6 trillion data points indexed in there to do real-time correlation. But the idea is to create a integrated application and that actually allows us to do a true risk-based vulnerability management program that helps basically reduce the time to remediate from detecting of the asset to actually patching the critical flaw as quickly as possible. I'll explain a little bit more, but the key components of VMDR today, as we call it, are basically ability to discover an inventory, all managed and unmanaged assets, which is our global asset inventory. And the idea here is that Qualys gives unlimited number of sensors, whether they are agents or passive virtual passive scanners or virtual active scanners or cloud connectors, whatever it is, to be able to pull together an extensive inventory into one place of all of the assets that you have. There is no magic bullet for good asset discovery and inventory. You have to collect data from many different sources and correlate that. So that's the first thing. So while it's not in the name of VMDR, it is the first critical component that is included as part of VMDR, which is the ability to do extensive asset discovery and then inventory and categorization and normalization of those assets, both for managed and unmanaged assets. And I will give a quick demo of that as well. Another key part that gets overlooked a lot is the ability to automatically organize assets with dynamic rule-based tagging. because it's not just about a big list of assets that is thrown into the product or discovered as IP addresses. They also need to be attributed to the specific business units, specific owners, specific locations. And so a lot of that can be pre-built into Qualys with simple dynamic rules, which allow the organization of assets that are being discovered by the system. So you can actually say that if this software is running on this particular system, then automatically tag it as a PCI asset, which means that that asset gets picked up in the right reporting and the right scanning automatically. So that is the second part that's included as part of it. Of course, with the ability to have agents on many different operating systems, in addition to the scanning that we provide, we have ability to really do a continuous assessment of all the vulnerabilities. We also include configuration assessment as part of that. So not just looking at the vulnerabilities, but also looking at what are the configurations of the device, what's the password length, if there are open shares that are configured a certain way, etc. It also includes an threat prioritization engine, which actually looks at the context of the machine. So it specifically looks at the attack surface, not just by saying that this vulnerability is known to be exploitable, so that's why it's a critical vulnerability. The question is it exploitable on the specific asset? And that's the big part that we really work on. And then part of VMDR is also being able to, a lot of times, even if you know the list of vulnerabilities, being able to actually narrow it down to the exact patch that needs to be deployed on the exact operating system is quite challenging. And that is sometimes not obvious, and that actually takes a long time. So with VMDR, we really bring all of these into a single workflow so that you can really reduce the amount of time between these various silos that you usually have. As I mentioned earlier, the ability to discover all of the software. So, being able to find out all of your Zoom, all of your endpoints that have Zoom, all of your endpoints that run a certain software, categorize and normalize it by looking at what's digital content, what's storage. For example, you can say finance systems should not have cloud storage enabled on them, etc. That auto grouping is something that I'm going to talk about. Another thing that is currently being done is the ability to define criticality of assets. So already with the tagging, you can create groups of tags that are for critical assets or medium criticality, high criticality. And now we are working on being able to give weightages. So I'll discuss about that. But the big part is the ability to leverage a real-time threat indicators. So not just look at this list as a big vulnerability list that is filtered by CVSS based scores only and by Qualys severity or any other severity. The idea to highlight based on the system key indicators which could cause denial of service, devices that have vulnerabilities known to be associated with malware, or a lot of times now we see this a lot more recently where more and more vulnerabilities are included in these sort of exploit kits that are available, which leverage these vulnerabilities when you whether it's a drive-by or a successful phishing or a email sent to somebody with a exploitable code in it. 0 days public exploits that are easily available, any vulnerabilities that are seeing dark web chatter or social media trending because there's a lot of activity around it. So we now provide multiple different ways directly built in the ability to focus on these threat indicators as a way to prioritize the vulnerabilities that need to be mitigated first. Second aspect of this is the asset context, as I mentioned. So it's one thing to have a vulnerability that is very exploitable, but you also have to look at the context of the attack surface on the specific asset. As an example, you may have a vulnerability that is on the kernel that is not running, in which case the criticality of that vulnerability, even though it's otherwise high, is actually not as high on the given asset if it is not on the currently running kernel or on the running service. There are vulnerabilities that are reported in the software, but they may be mitigated by configurations on the system. So by combining configuration assessment as part of this, we actually bring in more asset context. Sometimes you want to focus first on vulnerabilities on a given asset that are remotely discoverable without authentication, because authenticated vulnerabilities, they are helpful to patch, but then they may not be as critical because it takes more time to actually discover those, because the attacker may not have authentication. Uh, is the asset with the database vulnerability, if that is a internet facing asset, that becomes even more critical. If there is a vulnerability that has been sitting there for a long time, statistically that obviously creates higher probability that it is going to get exploited. So as an example, that 7monkeys vulnerability that I was mentioning about, that actually is on the terminal service, and you could say that because it's an exploitable vulnerability, if any devices that have that vulnerability are high priority. However, if the terminal service is not running on that asset, then it is not as high a priority, because exploitation first requires to get the service up and running. Sometimes even if the service is running and the vulnerability is there in the software, that vulnerability can be mitigated by NLA, network level authentication enablement, on the device. So which means that to be able to get to that, you first need to have authentication enabled, and which is the concept of being mitigated by the configuration. So too many times you may end up spending a lot of effort trying to patch vulnerabilities that may not necessarily be creating a lot of risk. So these are just some examples, but just to kind of give you a flavor of when we talk about why VMDR is so different, it is the ability for us to leverage our backend to prioritize, to correlate a lot of this data and prioritize these vulnerabilities over anything else that you may be seeing. And then the ability to, as an extension of VMDR, to also have the ability with Qualys, the same agent that is deployed, to also be able to deploy patches, not just the OS patches, but also third-party application, especially right now with the remote working, this becomes even more critical. And being able to correlate the patches with the specific vulnerabilities and not requiring VPNs are additional features of the patch management capability. One thing that's important to understand is that people say, I have a CCM, etc., but a CCM is behind your VPN and very challenging to get third-party OS patches in there. Here's an example of the Patch Tuesday that recently happened in May of 2020, and there was a .NET release that basically fixed 2 CVEs, but based on the operating system architecture, the operating system version of .NET, etc. Like for example, a 64-bit versus a 34-bit versus 32-bit versus ARM, etc. You basically narrowed it down to 34 different KBs that you had to look into to find out exactly which specific KB applied to which specific asset, because a asset with Windows 10 with a Japanese version of Windows 10 versus an English version of Windows 10 will have different files that need to be deployed. So Qualys does a very focused, precise identification of the patch for the specific machine, so we know exactly which file needs to be deployed on that particular machine. As I mentioned earlier, and I'll talk about this, is third-party patching, no VPNs, and being completely cloud-based makes it extremely easy, as these assets that are all over the environment, whether they are in the cloud, whether they are on-prem or they are remote, will pick up the jobs as soon as the agents connect back to the platform. A lot of additional capabilities in the platform to track remediation. So with our unified dashboard, the ability to track the mean time to remediate, so you can actually burn down your efforts for patching by being able to keep track of how many devices are actually still missing the patch, and then seeing that as a built-in trend, so that you can see the efforts are actually going on correctly and the patches are being deployed, is something that's built directly into the platform. Another key aspect of VMDR is traditionally vulnerability management solutions have had, including Qualys, have had pricing which is different for agent, different for virtual appliance versus physical appliance versus the actual asset license itself. So one thing we're doing with VMDR is also coming up with a very simple asset-based model. So basically you just pay per asset, and then whatever cloud agent or virtual scanners or virtual passive scanners or connectors to the cloud, certificate discovery, container discovery, mobile device inventory, all of that is completely included We also include asset categorization, normalization. CIS benchmarks are included as part of the per asset pricing. And also, most importantly, we also include CI/CD DevOps integration. So we have Jenkins plugins and other capabilities that a lot of customers leverage to basically include the ability to discover these things directly into the CI/CD pipeline, so that you can ensure that those images or AMIs that are being built do not pass your CI/CD if they have vulnerabilities. And this is out of the box integration part of VMDR that is already included. And so when COVID came about, this was a real challenge for a lot of our customers. And so Qualys came up with a free remote endpoint protection service that is based on VMDR, which we gave to all of our existing customers initially, and then to some of the new customers, which is basically 60 days no cost for being able to do all of your inventory discovery, vulnerability management, configuration assessment. It also includes deploying of patches to your endpoints for 60 days. And now on June 15th, which is, I think, which just we are, today we released the malware detection capability. So that same agent is also detecting any malware that you may have on that machine. So there are customers who have some EDR solutions, but there are still a lot of customers who basically only have endpoint protection antivirus solution. And so I think this is something that will help customers quickly for their remote endpoint specifically identify, use the VMDR capabilities, and then identify devices that they need to really prioritize and focus on because they may be missing patches, etc., but also because they may have active malware on them. So I'll show a quick demo of that. But this is really what it is that it is leveraging the exact same agent that already is deployed on these assets for asset inventory, for vulnerability management, as well as configuration assessment, to now be able to look at if there are malware files or network connections or processes, etc., detected on these machines without having to install any extra agent. So out of the box, we will showcase that. And of course, the reason is because a lot of times these things are, and this is an actual example of one of our banking customers who was running, one of the big four antivirus that was installed, and they were using Qualys for vulnerability management. But then when they turned on our malware service, which basically was just a checkbox, they didn't have to do anything, we discovered their systems had a lot of Trojans and backdoors, etc., that were missed by antivirus solutions because they came in through different ways that bypass the antivirus, and they were able to really get that value out of it very quickly without having to deploy or install anything extra. So ability to extend that vulnerability management, detection, and response to being able to do categorization and detection of malware as well is something that is also now included as part of it. And what we're seeing a lot of times is that a lot of these EPP solutions are not classifying the malware correctly. And so here's an example of a Azure Trojan that basically is not categorized correctly. If you look at on VirusTotal, some of them call it just unsafe, others just call it a malicious software, etc. Now, if you look at the TrickBot Trojan, you will see that again, it was incorrectly classified or not with enough data points that are classified for that particular malware. We do that within the Qualys VMDR extension for malware in a much better way. So we'll talk about that. So again, the idea is that being able to push this out in an easy manner to a lot of your remote endpoints. You can of course also use it on your server environment from a VMDR perspective, but the ability to have a quick, easy way to detect this, I think, is very valuable. Also, we are working on releasing our EDR capabilities, which will be released around August or so, which will allow additional abilities to be able to quickly kill process, delete file, quarantine file, etc. And so as Qualys comes up with other maturity of their EDR capabilities, this can help consolidate multiple different VMDR and EDR capabilities into a single product. So I'm going to now give a quick demo, so that way you can see what I'm talking about. So let's see. So hopefully you can see the Qualys VMDR screen.
Yes.
And I think a lot of you, if you're Qualys customers, have already seen the overall interface, but this is the new VMDR interface that basically brings multiple of these capabilities together. These are the brand new dashboards that we are pushing out to all of the customers. Even though you may not be a VMDR customer, the dashboard is something that we will be pushing out. So you can create completely custom dashboards, and I will showcase the ability to look at all of your prioritization and vulnerabilities, etc. But the first thing that is on everybody's mind is how do we do asset inventory and discovery? And so I'll give a quick view of that. So today, when you log into Qualys, you have the ability to get started with your inventory and discovery, and you can start with an unlimited number of free agents from Qualys across multiple different operating systems for inventory and discovery. So in this example, we have 3,000 plus assets that were discovered and 320,000 software resources that were discovered. We also discovered 238 devices that are missing the Qualys agent. So you can also see if people are pushing things that don't have an agent. You can expand this inventory additionally with synchronization with a CMDB like ServiceNow. You can expand it with free cloud agents for inventory from Android and iOS as well. So you can, for your handheld devices that banks, etc. are using, you can keep that visibility in the same platform. You can bring in connectors for free to bring all of the resources from an inventory perspective of your Azure, AWS, GCP all in one place. And then expand the ability to have the unmanaged passive inventory, which is where we can see that in the last 24 hours, 10 new devices were discovered in our offices, as an example, where we have these passive sniffers that don't require an agent or don't require an active scanner, but they can basically just look at the network and see what devices are being detected so that you can look at your unmanaged devices as well. But I will start off by initially giving an overview of the kind of data that we're able to produce with the dashboard. So in this case, you will see that for an environment like Qualys, where we have about 1,400 employees, these are 1,361 notebooks, 44 desktops, how many cloud instances, down to 21 laser printers across all of our global offices, down to the single inkjet printer that is in my office in San Francisco Bay Area. And all of this data here you see in the screen is completely categorized, normalized by Qualys, and the customer hasn't given any mappings to tell us what is a laser printer or what is a desktop or what is a laptop. So we give full breakdown of operating systems. We can see what are client devices versus server devices. Here's a breakdown of all of the client devices, and you can see that there's 311 MacBook Pros. And if you click on that, 11 different models. So we track each individual model. We track end of life and end of sale of models as well. And you will see that 181 of them have moved to the 2018 version, versus there's still a few that are moving on to 2019, and there's still one which is a 2016 version that is still in use. And if you click on that, you'll be able to see that 2 hours ago, this was live in San Francisco, and this machine belongs to our CEO, Philippe Corto. And with that, we can get immediate inventory on who's logged in, when was the last time this device showed up, operating system, whether it's end of life, hardware is end of sale, everything about the BIOS, the UUID of the BIOS, the disk space, processors, services that are running on the system, user accounts that are created on that particular system, any multiple network connections from a Wi-Fi or Ethernet, what are the ports that are exposed outside, what services are running on those ports, any software that is installed. So not only just do we throw the list of the software, but we can also tell that what type of software it is. So this is a presentation software versus a web browser versus email productivity software. In this case, there is Apple QuickTime Player, and you can see that this thing was end of life. It's still on the machine, end of life in 2019. But in this vein of bringing more context, as I mentioned, we also bring the last use date. So you can see that while it is installed, he has not used it since February 5th. So with that, you kind of get additional context directly into the platform. And I'll take an example and just to show you how quick and fast it is to be able to live through these devices in production at runtime. So we can just type in the username and you'll be able to come up. So this is my username, and you can see that this device that I'm using out here in Saratoga in California right now, what everything that is installed on that particular device, etc., install software, what's end of life, what's end of service. So you can see that we're using case, and this particular agent of case is end of life. But then if that comes into the office, we are also tracking the traffic summary. So which means that we also see the device from a traffic perspective, what's going in and out of the device. And as you can see, we're not really going into the office. So there's a couple times that I went in, and then you can narrow down to see what happened from a traffic perspective just by looking at the traffic without an agent. And we provide a lot of rich information to see that device, what services did it use, what kind of connections did it create to Outlook, what time, how much data was transferred, etc. So you start to kind of look at a lot of the network related stuff coming in into one place. And you can then from there on get more additional details of what are the traditional vulnerabilities on that particular device. What does the prioritization of those vulnerabilities look like? What is the detection age of the vulnerabilities? That 20 of those have been there for over 180 days. How many of them are associated with malware, etc. Be able to directly create a patch job from here to deploy the missing patches. So there are 4 critical patches that are missing on that system. And you can directly create a job from here to use the agent to push that patch out. Or you can look at to see all the telemetry information that you can pull from that device. You can push it into your Splunk or SIEM as well, but we pick up all file, registry, network, mutex, process changes, and bring them as part of our indication of compromise solution, which is an add-on to VMDR. And so you can see that 9 hours ago, I executed this particular process, and then it has been discovered that I'm running a potentially unwanted software on this particular system, which is something that I need to look into, which is the EaseUS TrueDo PC whatever tool that I was not aware of that was installed on August 12, 2019. So I need to look into that. If this is a server, you will see that you are also able to do configuration assessment of it. Part of VMDR, you can do configuration assessment to see how the device is doing against CIS benchmark, how many controls are passing, how many are failing. You can see 30 encryption controls are failing, and then here you can see the very specific details about every control that is failing and why it is set that this particular control is failing, right? So in this case, access to BitLocker, for example, is not correctly set up. So you start to get that context in one place. Now, if this device is a server, you can also do file integrity monitoring, create policies around that to be able to discover all of the processes that are being changed, who's changing them, what type of changes are happening. Again, with the exact same agent, with one agent that is doing all of these capabilities. And so typically we ask the customer if they don't use Qualis and a single platform, how many different tools do they have to use between Tripwire and SCCM, etc., to be able to do a lot of the stuff that we provide out of the box. I'll give a quick example of how easy it is to figure out what you're looking for. So today Zoom is something that is on everybody's mind. So all you have to do is then just go into here and say, show me everything where the publisher of the software is Zoom, and it'll immediately come back with 626 instances across each different version of Zoom that is installed on these endpoints. So there are 140 endpoints that are on 5.0.2. And then you can see that the 4.6 and below, I think, were the ones that were really vulnerable. So you can see there are 13 that have that particular, and you can see now by drilling down, I can click on the specific one, And I can see that this device that has that Zoom software was seen in Pune 22 minutes ago, and who's the user that is logged in. And then we can quickly jump on to see what are the vulnerabilities on that particular device, and then be able to click here to say I want to deploy patches, and then go in here, be able to pull up that particular host, see that it's missing these 42 patches. I can select specific patches, I can select all of them, and then just from here create a new job to deploy all of the patches on that particular system. And then you will see that we can select a lot of in-depth settings for the patching to happen, so that you can say whether you want it to be scheduled, you want it to be done now, whether you want something that gives some messages to show up on the system when that patching is being correctly done, and then just be able to create the job directly from here. Significantly simplifies and speeds up your ability to respond to a lot of different vulnerabilities that are out there. So today we support Windows for patching, and Linux, etc. is coming pretty soon. But as you can see, today we can do a lot of additional tracking within that platform. Jumping more to the prioritization after the asset inventory, I can showcase how we are able to be able to track not just the vulnerabilities on a basic dashboard, but you can do a lot of the vulnerability tracking, as an example in Qualis, directly by being able to take and slice and dice that information by not just the top most prevalent vulnerabilities, etc., but you can do it by location. So you can see headquarters versus Washington versus Raleigh versus India, UK, France. So you can track all of that out of the box. You can do it by department. So executive team versus the HR department versus finance versus legal. So you can really track and even trend directly out of the box for these particular assets. Very easy to create new dynamic dashboards, and also new dynamic widgets. So I can see here, if you want to create a widget, we can take the example of Zoom Windows assets. You can see, I can come in here and I can say, for this, I want to know any devices that have a Zoom vulnerability. So I will say any vulnerability title that has Zoom. And then I can add to say only if the operating system is Windows. And so if you do a test and preview, it will say there are 70 assets that are Windows that have a Zoom vulnerability. You can very easily say, well, how is that a percentage of what? So how is that a percentage of the total devices that I have that are Windows? What percentage of those are? And if you can see here, you can see that 4.94% of my total 1.42 K devices, which are Windows, out of those 70 Windows devices have the Zoom vulnerability. And I can very easily just click here to say enable historic data collection, and then it will start collecting the data for me over a period of time. You can customize this widget very easily to say when everything is good, the widget is always green. So, assets with Zoom vulnerabilities should be really low. We can very easily say, but then if that particular, my threshold is 2%, if it goes above 2%, then I can very easily come in here and say, I want a custom value of 2%. And then immediately you will see that the color will change to orange. So as we keep track of these in the backend, we will automatically look at the values and keep track of it or automatically up to date. So this is a very easy example of how to add a dashboard widget. Now let's jump into the prioritization. So if you can see, I can very easily create a brand new report where I will take any tag. So here we have done this automatic tagging, as I mentioned earlier, of the various assets. But in this case, I'll take all the Windows OS clients. And as soon as we do that, you will see that it is about 1,100 hosts, 25,000 vulnerabilities detected across critical, high, medium, low, etc. 180, and then you can see it by the detection age. How long ago were they detected? You can also see the real-time threat indicators, which we have highlighted some that you should worry about, but we can very easily say, I only want to look at the ones that are associated with malware, are vulnerable, or have exploit kit, or rather are part of exploit kits. And I can hit prioritize now, and then it will immediately go crunch all those numbers and come back to say, out of the 1100 devices, 135 assets are prioritized. Out of 25,000 vulnerabilities, we recommend you fix 228 instances of these 46 unique vulnerabilities, and to patch those unique vulnerabilities across 135 assets. We have 37 patches that are available, and then from here you can go and either create a new patch job or add to an existing patch job, and you can immediately start patching. Very soon we will, the question came up earlier for zero-day vulnerabilities. Very soon we are also going to provide the ability to look at configuration mitigation. So even if it's a zero-day vulnerability, Qualys agent will also be able to take configuration actions. So you can look at it by vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, top vulnerabilities. So this one is affecting 13 assets, and I can say patch only this vulnerability across 13 assets. I can look at the patches. I can say this particular patch is on 35 assets. So I want to patch that particular, deploy that particular patch across all of those 35 assets immediately. Or I can look at it from an asset perspective as well. And so there you.
Hi, Sumit. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is Vikas. We just have 5 more minutes, please.
Yeah. I'm almost done with the demo. Thank you. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So as you can see, this kind of gives you that visibility into the prioritization, and from there on, you can add a lot more additional capabilities around being able to detect malware. So that same agent that you already have, you can look at that to see all of the incidents of malware that may be detected. So we will automatically detect malware, but we also provide threat hunting capabilities. So you can basically go in and say, all you have to do is go in and punch a hash in here that you have been given. And as soon as you do the hash, it'll come back with everything that matches that hash, including a network connection, mutex, etc. So you can see that that ability in the single platform to be able to do a lot of these things is something that is unique that we bring. So I will switch back to the presentation now. All right, there you go. So that was the demo. Thank you for taking the time. And this is all possible because of the unique platform we have built, which collects data from multiple different sensors instead of just using one sensor. Today, the platform is highly scalable. We do 3 billion assessments. We do over 5 billion messages on Kafka and multiple trillion data points indexed. Overall, Qualys as a platform, our goal is to really help customers consolidate multiple security tools into one. And so there are more detection and response capabilities coming. So endpoint detection response is coming. We are also doing the same for cloud, being able to take action on your cloud assets to fix configurations for your S3 buckets, IAM policies, etc. Container, we just released the ability to take remediation action on running containers to block malicious activity happening on containers. So the ability to do detection response there. We also acquired a company called One Mobility in Pune a couple of years ago. So we now are also working on having a mobile agent that can do quarantine and ability to uninstall software that should not be part of the system. Sas Security Detection, again, we acquired a company called Adya out of Bangalore, and they provide a very good way of being able to keep track of your O365 G Suite as well as soon Salesforce configuration for SaaS to be able to detect and then make changes to fix misconfigurations on SaaS environment as well. And so we are making a big leap with all the data that we are collecting for next year for Qualys to be able to provide security analytics and correlation data lake on our own platform. This can significantly reduce the amount of data that you have to put into SIEM solutions or potentially replace that, because a lot of the context and vulnerability configuration, malware process, etc. information that typically goes into SIEM solutions today is now already part of the Qualys platform. So when we build a security analytics correlation capability, This is something we are already working with a couple of banks in India as design partners, and they are helping us build this next generation of analytics, which can significantly reduce the need to have SIEM solutions deployed to try to put that SOC together. Qualys can import data from other sources where we don't produce the data and give that particular visibility. So with that, I hope I got this thing done in time, and we'll give a couple more minutes to answer any questions. But I wanted to give a brief idea of what VMDR was about, and then showcase the platform and the capabilities in the direction that we are going. So there is still additional work to be done to get better and better at the context, but this is the start that we have made. Happy to answer questions now, or also feel free to reach out to me directly on this email address, and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. So Vikas, Deb, hopefully that came across well, and happy to answer any questions that may have come across.
Yeah, so Sumedh, we had like 107 questions.
I can't
Some of them
answer those in 5 minutes for sure. Well,
So
we
we
will
have
answer each one of them
responded
later. So
yeah, so what I'm thinking is we'll document all these questions and respond to that and share with the team by today evening.
okay,
Most have been responded though.
Okay, yeah. If there's any couple of ones you want me to respond now, I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, look, one thing that came quite often was people being confused around the overlap with AV EDRs that they might be already using. So of course we have a broader answer, but if you want to speak something specific around how we still unify them all and not replace them all.
Yes, sure. I think it's a phased approach that we are taking. We are working on. So today, Qualys does not do antivirus. We do the malware detection capability part of EDR. So the ability to use the same agent you already have deployed to detect malware that might have been missed by your antivirus, which happens all the time, which is the reason why people deploy EDR solutions. But very few customers actually do have EDR solutions on top of their antivirus. So the strategy for Qualys is that our first version, malware detection, that went out today, will help you detect malware missed by antivirus. In August, we will also have the agent be able to take response actions for that kind of malware that has been detected, to kill process, to quarantine process, etc. And then we will also be able to, around the October timeframe, provide the antivirus capability OEM with a well-known vendor directly part of the Qualys agent. So you can potentially essentially replace the overall antivirus EDR suite with the Qualys solution. So this is the overall roadmap. Anything else, Deb?
Perfect. So we actually really have some questions are far more technical to be taken for now. So I think I'll pass the baton to yeah. So I think we should do that now. So let's move on with the program. I have given the control to Vikas now. Vikas said, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, but I will pass the baton back to you because we have a panel now, right, for 20 minutes. So
Right.
yeah, so you are going to moderate, and then Rishi and Ravi and Mr. Vishal is going to be on panel. Okay, and you are going to moderate.
Correct.
Thank
So
you. Yeah.
let me share quickly. Can you confirm if you can see my slides?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining and waiting until this panel. So our panel members actually come from different companies in India that are Qualys customers and non-customers included. So we have on the panel Vishal Salvi. He's the CISO for Infosys. Vishal, sir, can you confirm if you can hear our audio? We can also check your audio.
Yeah, hi Dave. How are you? Hi Sumedh.
Vishal, good to see you.
So we also have on our panel Rishi Rajpal. He's with Concentrix and is very popular across the CISO community here because he also is a part of the EliteCISO management body. And also joining us is Kumar Ravi from EXL. He's also an active member with EliteCISO. So good morning, everyone. So the panel discussion was kept very in line with what we looked at on Sumet's presentation. So the topic is risk prioritization should more focus on making your remediation strategies better and should not focus on reducing the work of remediation. Because today we have a lot of false sense of security with companies saying, I have applied this kind of secret sauce, and out of all these 30,000 vulnerabilities, I only have 9 of them to fix. And it is delightful to see that the number reduced from 30,000 to 9, but I really can't explain why these numbers went down. So we see that there's a big gap with all the approach that people take in remediation. So we kept our context around remediation today. So this is a question that I have. While I'll begin our panel discussion with Ravi responding to this question first. So Ravi sir, so when people say that the best weapon is something that you never have to fire, right? And but the truth is, you have to test them anyway, right? Because you bought them, so you must make sure that you test them. So we make these teams. We make red teams, which is external security people. We have blue team, that is folks from our internal teams. Purple team, that is the color you get when you have red and blue working together. Now, an essential part of every remediation program is involving IT, right? So what color should IT get? They aren't the best of friends with red and blue because we never give them a color. So I believe that we should give them a white color. So what do you think will get IT more proactively involved to work with security teams?
Thanks, Dave. So first of all, am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Oh, great. So thanks, Dave, for asking this question, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone on the panel. So I think I never thought of a color, but definitely, if I can talk about the role that IT team, plays, I think we can definitely choose on the color, that which color we should give it to them. By the way, green is my favorite, so I think I can give them a green color. But all what I mean to say is, I think mostly when we talk about the red team exercise, it's majorly a kind of you're simulating a hacker. So typically your pen testing team, which is specialized on doing the offensive security testing or red teaming exercise, these are basically these team members who do that. And by the way, just to put my response in the context, I also run the cybersecurity program for EXL, and when I say that, I actually am responsible for conducting the red teaming, and I would say, in other words, if you can say, the cyber drills and offensive cybersecurity assessments to test the people, process, and technology, shortcomings or the non-sync up areas. So I think I'm talking from my experience. And that's why I say, the red team is basically, which is done, like we say, totally independently, and blue team is on the other side, who are kind of chartered with the tracking that what all a red team did without having a knowledge. So these two teams do not talk, that. And in purple team, which is mostly my role, who overlooks, like, at both the sides, how the attacks are being matched with what is being done from the other side in terms to detect it. So if you were to conduct a test, maybe red team is, I would say, good enough. IT may not have a large role to play, but when it comes to the patching, or when you get the learnings from the red team exercise, I think you have to have teams who have to work on those shortcomings or the areas of identifications of improvement that you have done. So I think that's where the role of IT team comes into play. If it needs certain strengthening in the control system from a preventive perspective. At the same time, you may get findings in the detection part of it. Then that's where the InfoSec team or a cyber defense center team has a role to play. So if I keep my answer focused to the IT team, I think their role is pertinent for closing the loop of a red team or a purple team exercise. There may be certain actions that come out where an IT team has to step up the controls and make the environment, kind of completely a closed down system. So that's how I see the role of an IT team. We can give them maybe a white color, I don't mind, and a green color, anything that we want. That was just on a side note. But I think IT team is quite important from closing the loop perspective to imbibe the learnings that we get out of a red team.
Perfect. So of course, I actually made 2 questions, but I brought in some flavors to ensure that the response that we get from one panel member isn't getting repeated. So the same question in a different context and angle to look at, Vishal sir, for you is when they say, is it better to be feared or respected? And we say, is it too much to ask both if it's getting a thing done, right? So what strategic efforts do you think will result in the right balance of power between the IT office and the CISO office? And should it also be looked at as an organic remediation strategy, like proper teams playing along with teams, or should be an executive effort like a push? So what do you think large organizations can accomplish in a better way?
No, I think what has started to happen, at least that's what we are seeing in Infosys, is that it is becoming more of an integrated team, right? It's the lines, the traditional lines between the information security team and the IT team involved in remediation are blurring and should blur when it comes to addressing this problem. And the reason I say that it should blur, or they are blurring, is because of the fact that no longer IT hygiene, the basic IT hygiene, can be taken for granted, right? We are seeing the aftermath of and the impact of that in so many organizations getting impacted because they're not able to fix the problem of patch, they're not able to get the basic hygiene related to vulnerability fixing right. Okay, so so I think those organizations who get it will create a more collaborative approach towards working, because it's not about being feared or being respected. It's about basically being common to a cause, committing to a cause, and then doing whatever is required to collaborate together to be able to work together. And I think also this power struggle is also a passe. See, power struggle typically happens when there is insecurity and there is no clarity on, how the role and the work is going to pan out. In today's context, when it is very clear that this is a very important, essential part of your work, uh, nobody should really think about insecurities or politics around this, and you need to focus on basically what now needs to be done to protect your organization, right? So I think, but having said that, you cannot completely take off, power struggles and politics out of it. So I think it's incumbent on the leadership, and I'm not just talking about the IT leadership or the cybersecurity or infosec leadership. I'm talking about CEOs and the chief operating officers who need to create a conducive environment for both the teams to work together to be able to work towards like, solving this, because technology can only do so much, right? And I think today we have a fair amount of innovation and arsenal in our in our hands to be able to really solve this problem. What is now required is a mindset,
Correct.
and that mindset can only come with collaboration. It cannot come with power struggle or with trying to be fearful or escalating issues and therefore getting things done.
Perfect. Hope it is as easy on feel as it sounds when you said. So who do you think should make the first approach? Can the CISO team go to IT and say, let's start working together? Because historically that's been difficult.
No, historically it had been difficult, but I mean, again, I can speak only for myself and my experience, and I think it's all a question of, at the end of the day, if you are an empowered CISO, then you can navigate the organization towards helping to drive the point that this is really how you want, the work to be established, right?
Perfect.
So traditionally, yes, IT has been measured on SLAs, on availability of systems. But I think increasingly they also know that in case you get breached, the amount of effort that would have to be put up by the IT team would be humongous. So, so there is definitely that realization, and I hope there is a realization that you're much better off spending that time now, fixing the problem and getting your organization to a basic hygiene, else you are going to be getting breached, and then you will have to spend sleepless nights, and heads will roll, and all of those things will happen. So so yeah, I mean, like I said, each organization is different. It's much more mature, it's much more smoother, because organizationally we have well defined roles within Infosys. So we can do a lot more very effectively, and there is an extremely high collaborative approach that we have created. I think the message to the industry is this. Okay, so what we have also, like if you look at the product companies and others, right, they have also not been able to recognize the difference between a CISO organization and IT organization, and therefore, simple things like fine-grained access control, defining security roles, defining IT roles have been missing. And as a result of that, we have not been able to kind of create those visibilities. IT had not been giving visibility because there were no security roles. They didn't want to give full access and other things. So as an industry also, we have reacted very slow to this recognition that there is a CISO office and there's an IT office. Hopefully now a lot of things are changing, and we have getting more clarity. Even the buyer has earlier been IT, now the buyer is CISO. So organizations found it difficult to change, adjust to that change, right? But I think that is also changing now. The last thing which is required is the leadership. Like I said, the CEO's office, the CRO's office, and the CEO's office need to recognize this at a very early stage, and they need to make it happen. Because especially if, for example, you have an extreme situation where the infosec team and the IT teams are warring, or the infosec team does not have the empowerment or the teeth to drive change, then you will not be able to create an organization which is resilient to these attacks. I think that realization has to happen, and that the change has to be driven from top.
Correct. Perfect. Thank you, sir, for the insight. So, Sumit, can you hear us? Do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Vishal, and we've worked together to go through this transformation. But I think there's another aspect to why there has been a pushback for security for a few years from IT, and I think because inherently, having come from engineering and IT, inherently IT is always taking a risk-based approach towards changing things, right? So that's why when it comes to new releases or updating configurations, etc., for their own needs. So even if there is a bug or something, people don't just go and deploy a new software immediately. They go through a risk-based analysis to see if this bug should be fixed now, should we wait for a month from now, etc. And so they have the change control, etc. What has happened is that with security teams basically saying you need to fix this without any proper good reasoning, just to say, oh, because it's a vulnerability, and no detailed analysis, I think also creates a huge amount of work for IT without being able to assess the risk, to just blindly start fixing and patching things without really knowing if this is required or what kind of impact it is going to have. And I think as prioritization capabilities, and if you look at what VMDR does, as more of that is happening and more as the teams can narrow down the focus on the immediate fixes that need to be done, instead of just blindly saying fix all of this on everything, being able to take that specific risk-based approach will also reduce the amount of work that IT has to do in a panic mode or in a stress mode to patch and fix those things. Here now you can have a much more focused and specific set of things that IT needs to do with proper explanation. And I think that can also help push the patching programs much faster and much better by reducing the friction.
Correct. Perfect. So I actually would bring a different twist to the same question. We did speak about things that we have on the field. So we had a perspective from Kumar Ravi, we had a perspective from Vishal sir that was more around the management and the power struggle and how to get it done. But looking at a different angle again, so this is my question to Rishi sir. Rishi sir, if you can you hear us?
Yes, Dave, I can hear you.
So this is small statistics that I found. In 2019, 36% of vulnerabilities had an exploit, and 77% of them were actually from third-party apps. So problem children like Java and Flash have been constantly, of course, fighting for the top spot, right? We all know that. Now, as a strategy in our remediation exercise, we always separate OS and apps and we do that solely from a perspective of operational efficiency in patching, not from the point of risk, right? So how do you think we should strategize open source and third-party patching specifically? Because despite having all these tools at hand, we still don't do a good job with them, right? So how do we do it specifically for open source third-party patching solely based on the risk, given that more and more successful exploits are the direct result from third-party applications?
Yeah, and that's the reason they strong patch management, basic hygiene, right? And that should not only cover OS but also apps. And you're absolutely right. This is the area which is kind of a little ignored, and we see companies running towards patching. I mean, just way off, like a Chrome patch is released because the exploits are available. And I think the entire vulnerability management solution is going for a complete changeover. And I give this analogy: if we go back 2, 3 years, 4 years, I mean, if I go to a doctor and doctor says you have fever, and that's it, the consultation is over. How would you feel about it? Because he's not prescribed you any medicine, he's not given you any medicine, right? So and that's the change we are seeing in vulnerability management solution that bringing in. So basically, you find the problem and you remediate the problem, right? So I think since you are sitting on the system, you have complete visibility of the system, and we can avoid death by endpoints. And I personally see a lot of consolidation happening on the endpoint space. And let's see who will lead this game. But eventually, I see a lot of consolidation happening because there is so much processing power. And by the way, I bought system to do business, not to do security, right? So there's no point having 8 endpoints doing their own job and then business applications getting impacted. So I think I see a lot of consolidation, and these things are not to be neglected. And the company or the OEM or the partner who will do most comprehensive job with least amount of time and least amount of foothold will lead the way.
Perfect. So, Vishal, do you want to put some light from Infosys side on these angles? Like, do you have a separate program that emphasizes solely on these things?
Yeah, I think, Dave, of course, you know it, but I think, for the benefit of others, basically for us, a holistic approach towards, fixing vulnerabilities and fixing patches is the way to go. Also, scanning is no longer sustainable. You need to have it more persistent based visibility and remediation. And I think it needs to now take a zero tolerant approach, and across all flavors. You cannot just say that I'm good in, focusing on Microsoft vulnerability, so I should be fine. You have to go and make sure you patch everything and build a zero tolerant approach towards remediation, right? And that's really how we are doing it at Infosys.
Perfect. Thank you all of the panel members for the answers to the first question. The next one takes it to a different way of looking at the same problem. So this, I think I'll begin with Vishal sir, now that his video is on. So Vishal sir, so when it comes to doing things well in a enterprise-wide threat and VM program, so we think that real-time asset discovery, inventory, telemetry is checked. We either know products or already have products or have a process in place to do it. Vulnerability assessment, checked. Threat prioritization, checked. Automatic remediation, checked. Integrating with third party is also checked. Bringing risk visibility from all attack vectors, checked. Now, if you look at Sumay's VMDR presentation also, all these things were very organically covered, saying this is the new normal for a VM program going forward. So where do you think we can improve further significantly? So this is what we see as a new normal today with VMDR. Where do you think our next focus should be? Tool side, process side, talent side? Because we can't solely grow on one angle and leave the other legs, faulty.
So I think, obviously, whatever I keep saying this, right? There are two important elements which is happening in the industry. One is the sensor is becoming extremely powerful, and the second thing is cloud intelligence is reality, right? So I think whatever, whenever we look at threats, whenever you look at remediation requirements, and also in terms of identification of any real-time alerts which are happening, I think the complete full automation, policy-based automation is the way to go.
नेक्स्ट मंथ है हमारा इसका क्राउड स्ट्राइक वाला.
So I think that is the way to go. I guess it has to be a policy driven. Any human intervention is not going to scale, and so that is.
Guys,
We're getting
can you,
feedback.
everybody, can everybody go on mute except the panelist and Vishal and person who's speaking? Thank you so much. Sorry, Vishal, go ahead.
Yeah, so let me just quickly summarize what I was saying, that I think, this auto remediation and automation and policy driven remediation is going to be very important for that orchestration, right? That is one. Second is, while I talked about collaboration and I talked about, how between IT and security teams, what I think you need to understand is that IT has traditionally been using various tools for asset management, asset discovery, and software compliance. Okay. Now, interestingly, what is happening in case, for example, with Qualys coming in, is that they are realizing that there are some of those earlier investments that IT has done. Perhaps Qualys can, do it much more efficiently, whether it is in terms of asset visibility or is in terms of, rogue application and SaaS compliance. So I guess I know Qualys or tools like Qualys are looking at security, but I guess if you want to really make one solution coexist, you may have to, there is some adjacency which is coming in terms of being able to replace those tools, so that there's one tool which actually does both rogue application remediation as well as software compliance, license compliance, and so on and so forth. So that's the second piece. And I think the third piece which is there is, if you look at in terms of at the heart of the problem of patch is this either the lack of awareness or knowledge or motivation by the teams who are reluctant to go ahead and actually do the changes. So I think if there is a much, you have to keep on focusing on increasing the assurance that the tool can provide to the whole ecosystem, that it's okay for using this one solution, not just for visibility and identifying vulnerabilities, but also to do remediation, right? And giving very clear, steps and actions in terms of what that auto remediation means, right? So build confidence and assurance on use of the tool for the deployment, because even if there's a small element of doubt or lack of confidence that the team has, it can create significant impact in terms of the ability to go and do the remediation. So these are the three things that come to my mind.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Saja.
And I'm sorry, we don't have much time for other panelists. Maybe if you want to ask them for one line short answer, then we can continue.
Questions. So this is you, this is sir. So, quick and easy. So we all know that the electric bulb wasn't invented, as a reiteration of trying to make the, candle better, right? So it was about a goal to create stable light, and it was disruptive effort. So hence this transformation. So in your opinion, what, are we doing the same mistakes again and again in, cybersecurity and expecting different results? If not, what remediation strategy or what should be the transformation in remediation be focused on or should be about?
Yeah, and I think I'll keep it short, Dave. So the transformation, the remediation strategy should also revolve around visibility, right? You need to really have visibility on your network before you start remediating stuff, right? So that's the base, and I think we are seeing transformation happening in that space by different OEMs. And once you start seeing assets on your network, you will start managing them. So right now, I see, and as per Gartner also, majority of the investments are on visibility. There was a time where everybody was spending on prevention, but it's not. It's all about detection and visibility now. So let's focus on the visibility. That's where I think transformation is. Thanks, Dave.
Perfect. Quickly so that we can have our last panel member Ravi sir also put some light on it. So Ravi sir, you all saw that COVID-19 was the biggest reason for all digital transformations in the last 3 months, right? And security programs did underwent a test of agility given the remote workforce situation. So we expected our end users either to be security champions themselves, or we found out that our programs weren't designed to handle these things at scale. So what do you think will fundamentally change in cybersecurity now? Specifically the way we look at risk and remediating them. So from a vulnerability standpoint, and I'm asking this question because you and me know we are engaged in fighting a specific challenge, because of exactly the same scenario.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks, Dave, for asking and being cognizant of the time. I would also like to, kind of keep it short and sweet. So what I would say rather, we have seen all that COVID-19 coming in, and business operating environment has been changing. The delivery model has been changing. And what the organization today are doing, they're largely assessing and reprioritizing their security controls landscape, I would say, especially going to the work from home operating model, and which is because obviously the new normal, and it's going to stay at least for some time, and maybe in the long run for some part of the operations. So every endpoint, because of that, has become a perimeter now. Now, earlier, they were all endpoints, they were all secured within the perimeter. They did not have any touch points outside directly, but now they all are at home. They are, kind of exposed to your personal infrastructure, and they have become like gateways, again, like, comparable to the firewall or the perimeter routers. They are now directly accessible. So a lot of threat landscape has changed. And while there is a continued rigor which is maintained by the organization to ensure data center security and in-house security, the control environment, I can see, is rationally pivoting towards the endpoint and end-user focused security, which is, I now call, the new most prone frontier in the cybersecurity landscape. So I think organizations are looking at it, and if I talk about from EXL perspective, I think we align with NIST cybersecurity framework as well, apart from aligning with other standards, which are the fundamental underlying, ISO 27001. So we have done ourselves this exercise to look at the controls that we have put in the all IPDRR, which is like identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, to look at it, how everything is now changing and now addressing the external environment as well, which is the work from home environment. So just to pick a very few examples, relevant ones, earlier you were doing probably cyber drills, which were like, kind of you were doing it inside, but now a new, I would say, scenarios that have been added extensively. The library of that has that if a machine gets compromised by, let's say, phishing, and then how a lateral movement can happen to your core nearest data center, and then it can proliferate to your other global data centers. So that has changed in the identify part. Similarly, on the detect part, we have also added now, we are putting a lot of focus on UBA, which is like the end user anomalies detection. In the respond and recover, we are adding capability as to how to conduct a remote investigation, how to build a system which can remotely build the system after a system has been contained and eradicated. So I think all those capabilities now need to be looked at, keeping in mind the new threat and control and risk landscape. So that's how I will kind of put it to pause here, and that's how we are changing.
Perfect. So I think I can pass the baton to our host. But before that, I think Sumit, do you want to speak something, and then we can give it to Vikas sir?
Sure, I'll just keep it short as well. Thanks everyone for your time, and I think great conversation and great insight from the panel members. I think I'm very hopeful that we are changing and we are doing things differently. I think two key things that have changed in IT are that for your own infrastructure, people are trying to correct their mistakes upfront in the CI/CD pipeline, and I think that's having an impact in just making things better and lesser issues in production. And the second thing is that every single device that is coming onto our network now is wanting to be an IoT device. So less and less we have to worry about patching those devices, as your TVs and everything on your network is the vendor's responsibility to make sure that they have a way to patch those devices automatically and reduce the amount of strain that it is on the individual organization to do that. And I think combining those two, and then for the rest of it, bringing capability like VMDR to help prioritize based on risk, I think together that can certainly make a big impact towards better hygiene from a perspective.
Perfect. So, Vikas sir, you want to take over? Do you have your randomizer ready for the lucky draw?
Yep, I've got that ready. If you can make me host, I will quickly share my screen.
Yes, 1 second.
Yeah.
There you are.
Perfect. Let me see. Okay, let me see if I can share my screen. Dave, I'm not able to share my screen. Can you give me access for that?
Oh, you do have host, right? So, okay, check
yeah, I can share now. Let me see. So close this one from here, click on this guy, and then share the screen. Let me know when you see my screen, please.
Yep, can see.
Great. So this is the Wheel of Fortune. It has got all the 350 participants, those who registered. And what I'll do is I'll click and the wheel will spin, and this will randomly pick one person. It is not fixed. It is all random, right? And then you must be present to claim the Amazon Alexa. So if your name comes, then you have to type in the chat window that you are available over here. Okay. And Devashi, you will get that response. So let me know if you get the response. Okay. So I'm going to spin it. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Mr. Parshnath TN. Mr. Parshnath, are you there in the audience today? Debashish, so chat response will come to you.
So,
I'm here.
Vikas, it will come to you. I'll leave you the host.
Okay, Mr. Parshnath, you are here, right? That's what you said?
Yes.
Perfect. Sounds good. Okay, guys, we are done then. Congratulations. And thanks everyone for the great insights. Thanks Sumit. Thanks panel members. Great insights on this. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.